A king stands on the edge of a continent, his gaze fixed not on the horizon, but on the ghost of his father. He has secured a kingdom with the blood of his family. Now, he will conquer an empire to prove he was worthy of the throne he stole. He is 22 years old, and he has just crossed the Hellespont into Asia, with an army of veterans who fear his ambition more than any enemy. This is no longer Alexander the Prince, the survivor. This is Alexander the Invader, and he has come to fulfill a destiny generations in the making. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Immortal History. In our last episode, we witnessed the brutal forging of a king. Now we follow that king as he crosses the threshold from Europe into Asia, from Macedonian politics to world conquest. Today we march with him to his first epic confrontation with the Persian Empire at the Granicus River. We unravel the prophecy of the Gordian Knot, and we stand on the precipice of the battle that will pit king against king, the legendary clash at Issus. The history books tell us Alexander invaded Persia to avenge the wars of a century and a half ago, but this was never just about revenge. This was a deeply personal odyssey. For every city he conquered, he was stepping further out of the shadow of his murdered father. For every army he defeated, he was silencing the whispers that he was a usurper. Our story resumes in the spring of 334 BC. Alexander stands on the shores of Asia Minor, having left his homeland in the hands of his father's most trusted general, Antipater. He has brought with him an army of 32,000 infantry and over 5,000 cavalry, but his treasury is nearly empty. He has no supply lines. His fleet is no match for the might of the Persian navy. He has gambled everything on a single desperate strategy: to win, and to win so decisively that the riches of the conquered land will fuel his war machine. This is a conqueror running on fumes and sheer terrifying self-belief. His first objective: find a Persian army and annihilate it. The Persian satraps, the regional governors of Asia Minor, were not idle. They gathered their forces to meet the young invader. Among them was a brilliant Greek mercenary commander named Memnon of Rhodes, who knew the Macedonians well. Memnon's advice was chillingly practical. Do not fight him, he urged. Burn the fields, destroy the harvests, and raze the cities. Starve his army and force him to retreat. But the Persian nobles, proud and unwilling to destroy their own lands, dismissed this scorched earth strategy. They believed their superior cavalry, positioned on the high, steep eastern bank of the Granicus River, would be enough to crush the Macedonian upstart. In May of 334 BC, Alexander's army arrived at the Granicus. His most experienced general, Parmenion, saw the trap and advised him to wait, to cross under the cover of darkness. An attack now, across a river and uphill against a fortified position, was suicide. Alexander, scoffing at the notion, declared, "I would be ashamed after having easily crossed the Hellespont if this little stream keeps us from crossing." He would not give the Persians the satisfaction of seeing him hesitate. He ordered the attack immediately. At the head of his elite companion cavalry, Alexander himself led the charge into the churning water and up the muddy bank, straight into a wall of Persian missile fire. The battle exploded into a chaotic, brutal melee. Alexander's gleaming armor and distinctive helmet made him an immediate target. He was swarmed. A Persian nobleman, Rosaces, struck him on the head with a scimitar. A blow so powerful it shattered his helmet. As Alexander fought back, another satrap, Spithridates, raised his sword from behind for the killing blow. In that split second, Clytus the Black, one of Alexander's commanders, lunged forward and severed Spithridates' arm, saving the king's life. With their leaders falling in the ferocious cavalry duel, the Persian line broke and the army collapsed into a rout. The victory at Granicus was absolute, but Alexander's actions in the aftermath sent a cold, deliberate message. The Persian nobles who had fallen were buried with full honors, but for the Greek mercenaries who had fought for Persia, there was no such mercy. Alexander viewed them as traitors to the Hellenic cause. The survivors, numbering around 2,000, were not treated as prisoners of war. They were rounded up, bound in chains, and sent back to Macedon to work in the mines as slaves, a fate worse than a swift death. To complete the symbolic statement, he sent 300 suits of captured Persian armor to Athens to be displayed on the Acropolis with an inscription, "Alexander, son of Philip, and the Greeks accept the Spartans from the barbarians who inhabit Asia." With the Persian field army shattered, the cities of Asia Minor began to fall like dominoes. Ephesus, Magnesia, and the great regional capital of Sardis opened their gates. Alexander presented himself not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, freeing the Greek cities of Ionia from a century of Persian rule. But he was also a pragmatist. His primary strategic goal was to neutralize the powerful Persian fleet. Unable to defeat it at sea, he chose to conquer its bases on land, systematically working his way down the coast. The victory at Granicus was not just a battle won, it was the first step in a grand strategy to dismantle the Persian Empire piece by piece. In the spring of 333 BC, after a winter campaign subduing the fierce tribes of southern Asia Minor, Alexander arrived at the city of Gordium in Phrygia. Here, he encountered a challenge not of flesh and blood, but of legend. In the city's citadel was an ancient chariot, its yoke tied to its pole with an intricate knot of cornel bark. The knot was so complex, its ends so cleverly hidden, that no one had ever been able to untie it. An ancient prophecy declared that whoever could undo the knot would become the ruler of all Asia. Alexander, surrounded by his generals and the expectant locals, wrestled with the knot. But it defied all attempts to find a beginning or an end. The crowd watched, waiting to see if this famed conqueror would be defeated by a simple tangle of rope. Frustrated, and with his characteristic impatience for problems that did not yield to direct force, Alexander declared, "It makes no difference how they are loosed." He drew his sword. In one swift, decisive motion, he sliced the knot in half. Whether he truly solved the puzzle or simply broke the rules is a matter of debate. But in that moment, the symbolism was overwhelming. Alexander was not a man to be bound by old rules or ancient problems. He would carve his own path to fulfilling the prophecy, creating his own solutions where none existed. He had not just untied the Gordian Knot, he had claimed his destiny as the future master of Asia. While Alexander was securing Asia Minor, the Persian king, Darius III, was not idle. He had taken personal command and was assembling a colossal grand army, drawn from the depths of his empire to crush the Macedonian invader once and for all. Alexander, hearing that Darius was gathering his forces near Babylon, began his march east. He pushed through Cappadocia and came to the formidable mountain pass known as the Cilician Gates, the main route into Syria. The pass was a narrow defile that could have been easily defended by a small force, but the local Persian satrap, misjudging the situation, had left it poorly guarded. Alexander's army secured the pass without a fight. Soon after, while resting his army in Cilicia, Alexander fell gravely ill with a fever, holding up his advance for a critical period. During this delay, Darius made a fateful decision. Believing Alexander was hesitant or afraid, and growing impatient with the logistical strain of holding his massive army, the Persian king decided to move. Instead of waiting for Alexander on the wide open plains of Mesopotamia, where his superior numbers would be a decisive advantage, Darius marched his army north, crossing the Amanus Mountains through a northern pass. The two armies, like ships in the night, had passed each other. Darius was now behind Alexander, astride his supply lines. The Persians captured the town of Issus, where Alexander had left his sick and wounded, and brutally tortured and executed the helpless Macedonian soldiers. When news reached Alexander, he knew he had been outmaneuvered. He had no choice but to turn his army around and confront the force that had cut him off. The stage for a second, decisive battle was set. In November of 333 BC, the two armies met. The battlefield was not one of Darius's choosing, but of fate's. It was a narrow coastal plain near Issus, squeezed between the mountains and the sea. This terrain was a strategic disaster for the Persians, as it completely neutralized their overwhelming numerical advantage. Darius could not deploy the full might of his army. At the center of the Persian line were his best infantry, 10,000 Greek mercenaries, and the legendary 10,000 Persian immortals. The great king himself was positioned in his magnificent war chariot in the center, as was the Persian tradition. His army was a sea of different peoples and languages, a testament to the vastness of his empire, but also a potential weakness. On the other side, Alexander's much smaller army was a hardened, unified force of veterans. He placed his trusted general Parmenion in command of the left flank, by the sea, with the difficult task of holding against the bulk of the Persian cavalry. Alexander himself took command of the right flank, at the foot of the mountains with his elite companion cavalry. Riding before his men, Alexander gave a rousing speech, reminding them they were heirs of heroes fighting for glory, not just for pay. He was not just a king, he was their comrade in arms. As he prepared to lead the charge, this was more than a battle for an empire. It was a personal duel between two men who embodied two different worlds. The battle began with Alexander leading a ferocious charge. At the head of his companion cavalry, he galloped across the Pinarus River and smashed into the Persian left wing. The disciplined Macedonian cavalry tore through the opposing infantry, creating chaos and panic. Meanwhile, on the Macedonian left, Parmenion's forces were under immense pressure, desperately holding their ground against the superior Persian cavalry. But the decisive action was in the center. Alexander, having shattered the Persian left, did not give chase. Instead, he wheeled his cavalry inwards, crashing into the flank of Darius's elite Greek mercenaries, who were locked in a brutal struggle with the Macedonian phalanx. This sudden, devastating charge from the flank broke the heart of the Persian army. Alexander now had a clear line to his ultimate prize, Darius himself. Spotting the great king in his towering chariot, Alexander and his bodyguards charged directly at him. The fighting around the chariot was desperate, but as the Macedonians closed in, Darius, fearing capture, was overcome by panic. He abandoned his chariot, leaped onto a horse and fled the battlefield. The sight of the king's flight was the final blow. The leaderless Persian army disintegrated, turning a battle into a complete rout. The narrow plain became a death trap as the pursuing Macedonians slaughtered thousands of fleeing, disorganized soldiers. Alexander chased Darius until nightfall, but could not catch him. He returned to the Persian camp to find it filled with unimaginable riches. But the greatest prize was not the gold or silver. In the royal tent, he found that Darius, in his panicked flight, had abandoned his entire family, his mother Sysigambis, his wife Statera I, and his young daughters. Hearing the sounds of lamentation from the tent, Alexander sent a messenger to assure them that Darius lived, and that they would come to no harm. He entered the tent with only his closest companion, Hephaestion. According to legend, the queen mother, Sysigambis, mistook the taller, handsome Hephaestion for the king and knelt before him. When her error was pointed out, she was mortified, but Alexander simply replied, "You were not mistaken, mother. This man too is Alexander." He treated the royal women not as captives, but with the utmost respect and chivalry, promising to protect their honor and maintain their royal status. This act of clemency was as powerful a statement as his victory on the battlefield. It showed a different side of the conqueror, not just a ruthless warrior, but a man who understood the power of magnanimity. He had defeated the King of Kings in battle, and now he showed mercy to his family. The Battle of Issus was more than a victory. It was a paradigm shift. For the first time, a Persian great king had been defeated in person by a European army. Alexander now held not only the western territories of the Persian Empire, but also the king's own family. Darius would later offer Alexander half his kingdom and his daughter's hand in marriage in exchange for his family's return. But Alexander, having looked the king in the eyes and watched him flee, had no interest in half measures. His reply was simple. There could not be two suns in the sky. From the banks of the Granicus to the narrow plain of Issus, the boy who had crossed into Asia on a desperate gamble was now the undisputed master of Asia Minor. He had faced down satraps and kings, proven his tactical genius, and survived by the slimmest of margins. The path ahead led south to the ancient lands of Phoenicia and Egypt. But the specter of Darius was not gone. The great king was retreating into the heart of his empire to raise yet another army, for one last epic confrontation that would decide the fate of the world. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who appreciates that history is written not just with ink, but with steel and courage. Every like, share, and subscription is a soldier in our ranks, helping this channel conquer new ground. Join us next time as we witness one of the greatest sieges in history at the island fortress of Tyre.